Joel Embiid is undoubtedly one of the best players in the entire NBA. This year, he averaged nearly 31, 12 rebounds, and 4 assists, and took home the scoring title and was top 3 for MVP. And many believe if he played the full season, he would have been the MVP. He has been elite for a number of years now, yet still he has failed to reach a conference finals. Maybe it's him, or maybe the Sixers have just failed to build the perfect team around Joel Embiid. Now, at the trade deadline this year, as we know, the Philadelphia 76ers traded for James Harden, trading Ben Simmons, who Embiid had played every year of his career with. So, a lot of people thought he hadn't won anything, really, just because Ben Simmons cannot adapt to playoff basketball with his style of play. But they did also trade for someone who does not have the best playoff track record himself. And Harden is not the same player he used to be, but he's still probably a top 5 playmaker in the league. Actually, matter of fact, definitely a top 5 playmaker in the league, and a decent scorer, but nowhere near the dominant one he used to be. And without Ben Simmons this year, the Sixers lost in 6 in the second round to Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat, who are now advancing to the conference finals. Jimmy Butler being a former teammate of Embiid. That's another year when they had Embiid, Jimmy Butler, J.J. Redick, Tobias Harris, and all those guys where they probably should have been better than they were. But obviously, Kawhi Leonard, and that happened. But back to the Sixers. So you have Harden and you have Embiid, and really this year, a bit underwhelming after all that hype after the trade, even though Harden is, a step behind from the player he once was. But going into this offseason, the Sixers are in a weird spot. They still, I think they're still definitely going to be a contending team next year, or a playoff contender at least. I don't know if they're a championship contender yet, but with the James Harden contract situation, Tobias Harris, and just the pieces around them, this offseason for Philly is going to be really interesting in terms of which direction do they go. Do they want to commit long-term to a declining James Harden, especially, as a scorer? And they really missed that. He had 0 points in the second half of the game they were eliminated. And as I said before, does not have the best playoff track record in terms of his scoring and just his overall performance as well. So in today's video, we will be going over the Philadelphia 76ers, their current situation, and what's in store for them for the future. So let's get into it. So as we were talking about with James Harden, he was traded at the deadline, and due to that, he could not accept his player option in time. So technically, he is a free agent this offseason, even though he said he will be back, and most people are assuming he will still accept his player option, but he didn't do it during the offseason, which means he's not definitely going to be on that same contract. I'm almost 100% sure he's going to be on the team next year. But do you really want to pay him long term? They made a big investment trading for him. Daryl Morey obviously put a lot of faith in his guy Harden, trading for him, and he was decent. He definitely took a step back. It was very clear in terms of his scoring in the playoffs. For him, it's like when he scores 24 points, that's really good. That used to be an off night for him. And if you want to give him a 4 or 5 year max deal, which he's gonna get a max, the back end of that contract is going to be really bad, especially the way, the trajectory he's on right now. It does not look pretty for the back end of James Harden's contract. But do you really have a choice at this point? You traded these assets for him, and if not, you're just letting him go, and even more, you're just wasting Joel Embiid's prime. He needs players around him. You have him, you have Tyrese Maxey, who's a really good young guard, going to be a really, really good scorer, and he's by far the second most valuable piece on this team. And then you have Tobias Harris, who really for a lot of the year wasn't that good, and then slowly started to, adjust into more of his role. And in the playoffs, had some really good games and seemed like he was finding his role and his rhythm alongside the newly acquired James Harden more. And then you have a bunch of role players around them. Danny Green, who tore his ACL next year, and that's kind of a big blow because he's a really good perimeter defender. You have like Danny Green, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, who's just really behind on the offensive end. We all know he's so good on defense, but just on offense, he's just so bad. Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, Danny Green. You got Georges Niang, who really struggled in the playoffs, but was pretty good for them, actually, in the regular season. And they also don't really have a backup center. Paul Reed did not seem ready. He was a great player in the G League and looks like he has the upside to be a rotation player. DeAndre Jordan is completely washed. And those guys pretty much make up the rotation of this team, and it's not very good besides Harden, Maxey, Embiid, and Harris is a good player as well. The supporting pieces just really weren't there. You have Paul Millsap and Furkan Korkmaz as well, but overall they need more firepower besides those guys, especially with Danny Green being out for maybe all, but definitely most of next year with the torn ACL. Now, with the situation they're in, they're probably going to have a pretty similar roster to next year. They will have their first round pick most likely, as it was reported Brooklyn, who has the choice of Philly's first round pick this year in 2023, is likely to choose the 2023 pick. So next year, Philly probably projects as something similar. They finished 51-31 this year. They'll probably be a solid regular season team that most people pick to maybe win a playoff series and, have a pretty good overall record, but not do anything crazy, which has pretty much been the Sixers every year that they've contended in the Embiid era. So, assuming they do that, where do you go from here? Do you enter a rebuild? Do you consider entering a rebuild and really fully ending the process in the Embiid era? Maybe think about trading him and just starting it all over. Really, the only guy I'd keep is Tyrese Maxey, if that is so. Another thing the Sixers really have to think about is the coaching situation. Now, they have expressed that they want to keep Doc Rivers around for next season, but a coach like that with a playoff history of, constantly falling short. He does have that one championship, but overall his track record in the playoffs is far from great. And he's paired with James Harden, another player whose track record in the playoffs is far from great. And if you're not wanting to keep Doc Rivers, maybe next year after they fall short again, if they do, what type of coach are you looking for? Are you looking for a young coach to kickstart a rebuild? Or are you looking for an old, experienced coach like maybe a Mike D'Antoni you bring in, who is very familiar with Harden? Obviously, he's a very different player, not nearly the scorer he used to. But if you're Philly, I definitely wouldn't feel 100% comfortable with Doc Rivers as the coach of my future at all. And I definitely think that's something they need to look into and, really ask themselves if he's that guy for them. And, with the Clippers, he fell short. Do the Sixers have that much trust in him as a contender? And also entering a rebuild, do you want him as the coach for that to guide Tyrese Maxey and other young players as well? So a lot of questions for the 76ers this offseason. It was just a quick recap of their current situation. I hope y'all enjoyed. Thank you for watching and peace out.